When you factor the Mayan long counts, 1,872,000 turnings of the stars, the end of the long count could never be 2012. It has to be 2046. So this is also the subject matter of my channel, showing the public what happened every 138 years for 58 centuries. So showing the source material, showing exactly what happened, and it's happened with such precision and regularity that we are able to easily extrapolate the next visitation of the Phoenix, which is going to be in the month of May, the year 2040, which is precisely what Nostradamus says in his Centuries. There's been a French scholar who discovered a date index to Nostradamus, and it changes everything, because everything Nostradamus, according to this date index, claims is going to happen in the month of May of the year 2040 perfectly mirrors every other time Phoenix has appeared and caused a reset. The study of calendars, we are in the year 5919 right now, Anno Mundi, which is the 3895 BC Adam and Eve reset, total systemic reset. So it's been 5,919 years since that epic destruction of a technologically advanced civilization. The time-keeping systems we have today are going to change. Well, this is precisely what we see in the book of Revelation in the second and third trumpet. It's exactly, because in the second and third trumpet, it specifically says that God is going to remove 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the night, 1/3 of the stars, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon. But if you're going to be highly specific and say 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the night, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, 1/3 of the stars, then it seems to be that you're talking about reducing the day to 16 hours from 24 and reducing the year from 365 to 243. This is the accurate interpretation, because what follows in the book of Revelation, in the narrative, is that suddenly the dragon becomes wroth because he learns that his time has grown short. And it's also corroborated in the words of Jesus, where he specifically says that in his prophecies that in the last days, time will be shortened, and this is done to keep them from the evil to come, because unless time is shortened, no flesh would be saved. So we have multiple corroborations that this is the actual interpretation of the matter, and that time is going to collapse. And the Maya date that at 2046. This is profound, because that's 6 years after the Phoenix returns in 2040, and according to the Revelation, we have 2 back-to-back cataclysms. That's all the book of Revelation is about. It's 2 back-to-back. Everything else is dressing. And on my channel, using the Greek, I show a complete analysis, removing all Judeo-Christian additions to the original Sibylline prophecy. You can remove them all, and you're left with 2 cataclysms in the book of Revelation. Then I show Mother Shipton's prophecy from 550 years ago, and she says the same thing. In the last days, 2 sky dragons will come back to back. Oceans will slip their basins. Cities of the world will fall. Total systemic reset. She perfectly nailed it. She was unlettered, illiterate, and she was just considered a healer. But she had this prophecy, this dream, and it was rendered into a poem called Mother Shipton's Prophecy. I am not talking about the 1800s version where somebody came in there and added a whole bunch of things she never prophesied. I'm talking about her core prophecy was only about the return of the 2 sky dragons. Then we have Nostradamus. In the date index of Nostradamus, not only does he talk about the return of the Phoenix, but he says that a second cataclysm will quickly follow the first one, and it will be far more terrible. Nostradamus date index precisely dates these at 2040, and then the worst one at 2046. I didn't make up any of these dates. All I did was bring these to the public's attention, that all this research corroborates each other. So, okay, this is a parody, because that's not the original face. The original face is painted, it's like an alien head, but it shows somebody.
I see it.
This is right around 1902, which was a Phoenix year. But this is a famous painting, and it's never been adequately described. But the Phoenix phenomenon are edits that happen to our reality as we are living it. The edits almost go unnoticed by the general public, simply because something darkens the sun for about a 2-hour period. The moon turns blood red. All over the world in different areas, red dust, red rain, red mud falls depending upon the local humidities. Destruction. It's an editing process. Every 138 years, something's editing, but it's covering up the edits with these destructive cataclysmic episodes. 1902 wasn't even a bad one. We have a lot of data from 1902, but it wasn't a bad one. 1764, before that, was a little worse. We have a lot of data on that. 2040 is going to be epic. It's going to be epic. These things happen to unfold in series. They build in magnitude until there's a massive release, like what's going to come out in 2040, and then it goes back. And it builds again. Every 138 years it builds. So there's been theories. The other researchers have gone through my data, and they come up with a theory that maybe the sun is like a battery, and that all this red fallout that comes from the sky is some type of shedding coming from the sun, and then it renews itself, because that's the legend of the phoenix. The legend of the phoenix is a winged bird flies into the sun dies, then the sun is reborn, revigorated as a young man again, and then for a period of time the sun gets old, then it shed, because that's exactly what the legend of the phoenix was about. The legend of the phoenix has red blood rains hitting the earth when the phoenix appears. Our modern day calendar, Anno Domini, was specifically designed by the church to control information. The information they wanted to control was the reset timeline. This is the information they wanted to control the best. And the best way to do it was to invent a calendar that it covered over 5 centuries. You gotta understand, the calendar we're on today started in 526. It wasn't even accepted by most of Europe till the 900s. It took 300 years for this calendar to even be accepted. Most people were still living by different timekeeping systems. So finally, the church got everybody to accept it. In the days of Isaac Newton, the calendar had, just around Isaac Newton's time, been accepted by all of Europe. That's how long it took. I ended up, not because of the state, not because of the retroactive laws. It is entirely my fault. I could have got out after 14 years or so, but I had been to maximum security, closed custody, administrative cell restriction, involved in riots, involved in all kinds of chaos in prison. I had totally become immersed into prison culture. But at the same time, I'm also doing my research. I'm doing my homework. And in 2004, a magazine named Paranoia picked up one of my articles, which gained the attention of a publisher who has never contracted with a convicted felon and hasn't since either. But this publisher has already published 5 of my books and is about to publish a 6th. My first 4 publishing contracts from Booktree in San Diego were as a convicted felon. When all this red tape was cut through, I ended up getting 4 publishing contracts while I was still serving time in prison. And I was publishing things that most people had never seen before. My bibliographies are very unique because of the information I came into contact with in prison. Most people don't know that prisons aren't going to spend a lot of money on inmates' libraries and education. So they get their books donated when old colleges from 150 years ago go down, get condemned. Those libraries in those old colleges in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, we're talking about high schools and colleges from the 1800s. When the new prison system came up in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the Bonnie and Clyde era, all their libraries were filled with books from all these older institutions. And the whole time I was in prison, I never thought it was really amazing that we had all these books from the 1800s in our libraries. We had all these books from all the way up to 1945. And I spent my life, over a quarter of a century. I ended up staying in Texas prison for 26 years and 42 days. 17 years old, I got out at 43. So I got out, though, with an education that very few people can ever boast, because I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have a family to take care of. There weren't other things in my life that were redirecting my attention elsewhere. All I did was read books data mine them, extract the information I need, organize that information, and the process of writing information that is first read, it's like some type of spiritual alchemy. I have this almost instant recall for sources, source citations, the books, authors. In all my presentations, I'm always telling people where I got the information, what these authors were saying. And a lot of times these authors aren't known to the general public. These are men who were amazing researchers in the 1700s and in the 1800s. Men who wrote profound books at the turn of the 20th century, in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. About 95% of all the data that I've ever divulged on YouTube comes from pre-World War II material, because it was after World War II when all the publishers of the world were basically a captured operation, and they were only putting out a certain narrative, and a lot of the things that were taught before the world wars had fallen off the syllabus. I had already written 17 or 18 books. I already had 13 published books before I ever started a YouTube channel. I had a wealth of information that most people had never even heard before, because I had the ability to go through these old libraries and these old books. I've literally studied books that were at Eastham Prison in Lovelady, Texas, the exact same library that Clyde Barrow had access to, the famous Bonnie and Clyde case. He was there. He may have read some of the books I read while he was in Eastham Prison for a couple of years. But it's a shame, because in 2016 I was released from prison, and by 2020 they had done away with the old libraries in Texas, and now prisoners have tablets. The ultimate form of censorship. Now they all have tablets. We didn't have any tablets when I was in prison, but now they all have tablets, and they have a certain syllabus of books that they're able to read, and most of them are fiction. What I accomplished could never be done again, at least not in Texas prison. You just can't. You know, I was in prison the perfect amount of years to do exactly what I've done, and I was able to data mine 26 or 27 bags full of information during this time that my dad saved for me. I told the story on YouTube a few times, and my dad's been in the chat many times, but the reason I have all this data is because my dad once a month would come to the prison. Sometimes my sister or my brother, but somebody would take the whole bag of research notes, take them home, and all those years, over 2.5 decades in prison, I always stressed, am I ever going to see my research again? So I would send all this home, and I had a pretty emotional breakdown when in 2016, in the month of December, I was released from prison. And my dad loves to tell this story, but they offered to take me to a steakhouse. They offered to do all kinds of things. As soon as I was released from Huntsville, I wanted to go. I told them straight, take me straight home. Just take me straight home. I don't want to go anywhere else. And I went up in the attic, and every single bag was there, and it was surreal. It took me over 14 months to organize all those notes to be able to start doing presentations from. I was adopted out of a very bad situation when I was 5 years old. And for 10 years, I lived with the Brashears family. My name is Brashears now, but it's not my birth name. My birth name was Durant. So I was adopted into the Brashears family. I stayed with them for 10 years until I was 15 years old. During that 10 years, I was under a puritanical mother. My adopted mother was a church administrator. She was very strict, and I have to give her credit, even though at 15 years old, she's the reason I ran away. But I have to give her credit for my literary achievements, my academic, my publishing achievements, because I had to go to church 5 times a week. And although I'm not religious today, that upbringing was an upbringing of intense reading and scrutinizing what I was reading. And I was allowed to go to the public library once a week, but I always had to read whatever she picked out for me. And as a reward for reading the book she picked out for me, I got to read my science fiction. I got to read my fantasy. I got to, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, Star Wars novels, whatever. I was allowed to pick one book a week for me. This went on for 10 years. So by the time I was 15 years old, I lived on the streets for 2 years in carpentry and in roofing, and I was supporting myself. And then at 17 years old, I hooked up with a buddy of mine that I went to school with I knew him when we were 13, 14, and 15. And his name was Joey Renesto. His real name is John. But Joey had gone full criminal. I had not seen him in like a year and a half. And I hooked up back with him when I was 17, and we were doing some odd jobs together, but they were legitimate jobs. And then we just started doing dumb shit that teenagers do. And one night got out of hand, and I went to prison at 17 years old. And my initial charges were aggravated kidnapping and aggravated armed robbery. But 9 months later, they changed my indictment because I had told the truth about what had really happened, even though John and the victim didn't tell the truth because neither one of them wanted anybody to know what happened. My own upbringing causing me to, hey, you know what, always tell the truth, had really started a huge investigation because there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit involved in my prosecution because we had carjacked this 19-year-old girl. We were both 17, but we carjacked her from a secure parking lot. It was the Galleria in Houston. So C-Tech Securities, Marshall Fields, and the Galleria got involved, and they got sued for millions behind this. And this exacerbated my prosecution. Now they needed some fall guys because our original deal was 90 days boot camp. But then this lawsuit and this litigation came up, and you know, it's all water under the bridge. I don't even care anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm proud of my prison upbringing because of what I accomplished in prison. At 17, I go up the river. I'm only supposed to be there for 7 years. But in Texas, we had a new guy that became governor, and you know who he is, George Bush, who later became president. And one of George Bush's first acts as governor is to retroactively apply parole laws, which everybody told him was illegal. You can't do that. But George Bush went on record publicly, and anybody can Google it and see, where he went on record and specifically said, I think it's about time that we reinterpret what we can and can't do about the U.S. Constitution. So he retroactively applied a bunch of laws about parole, and suddenly, at 24 years old, right when I'm coming up for parole to be released on good behavior, he had new laws put in place to retroactively apply parole, and now my expected 7 years turned into 15 years. He doubled the amount of period. This is right when I'm about to get out. You can imagine what a 24-year-old who had just spent 7 years in prison, how they would react. You can imagine that. I don't have to tell you. And that's exactly how I reacted. And I got a lot of major disciplinary. And I've showed my community my disciplinary records. I've got videos where I show my prison history, and I show all, I'm not proud of it, but I got involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, you thrust a kid into an all adult environment. It's not a good recipe. So Texas prison in the 90s was nothing but a place of violence. I mean, the prisons I was at were all maximum security, and we had Maury Povich there, Marvin Zindler. We had big names coming to interview prisoners, asking why are y'all killing each other? What is going on here? Why all this gang violence? So in the midst of all this, after the 7 years, and I realized, damn, I got to do 7 more just to come up for parole. And that's not even guaranteed, because if they can retroactively apply those laws one more time, well, they can do it again and indefinitely keep me here. If the Constitution is no longer a prohibition against tyrants just creating laws for political gain, then I'm probably never getting out. So when I adopted this attitude, I started doing prison time my way. And I don't need to go into detail about that, but I didn't see an exit. But the entire time I'm in prison, I haven't lost my interest. I'm still reading, I'm still researching, I'm going through my Bible. I'm reading Genesis to Revelation twice a year. I'm going through the entire Bible twice a year. I'm reading all these other books, and it was around 1999, before the Y2K deal, that I came into contact with David Icke. And I read a book by David Icke called Children of the Matrix. It's the first book that led me into other areas of research. And then William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. Tex Mars. I read a bunch of Tex Mars books. This opened my eyes that, man, there's a world much bigger than the world that Christianity has painted for me, the world that my mother molded me into.